It's another week, it's another devlog, and it's another time for me to tell you that yes, we are not quite there yet for having a build to share with you people. Hopefully next week. We'll get into the last couple of things that I need to do in a moment. But first and foremost, the game jam that I've been working on has ended. There will be a link down below in the description to where you can download and play the game. I am really happy with how it turned out. I didn't do like any of the programming. A lot of the 3D modeling has been done by me, and even then, not everything by a long shot. Mostly everything in the aquarium is my thing, which is not particularly feasible. So, did I waste 2 weeks of my time? Maybe. Am I still happy that I did it? Hell yeah, I am. I learned so much, as you can see over the last couple of weeks of devlogs. So that being said, going back into my own game. I'm gesturing to the screen over here, but you can't see it, but that's where Unreal has, like, it's loading, it's building the lighting, because I want to be able to see it in full quality. Anyway, you guys will, because after I'm done recording this, I'll go record some footage for it. I made the stomping enemy, the enemy that goes up and down. The only issue that I have with it right now is I want to have an enemy that you couldn't jump over. As it is right now, you can jump over it, but there is a little bit of a risk involved, because the enemy is based on a thwomp from the Mario series, but instead of it just being damaging at all angles or only damaging when it goes down, the way I ended up doing it is having it include spikes on the top and the bottom. So if you touch the top or the bottom, you get damaged, and you'll only be able to touch the bottom when it's going down. So, and then when you jump on top of it, obviously you also get damaged. I made it a little bit more hourglass-like because I quite liked the look of that, and I also wanted to have a thing with like two faces on it, a happy face and an angry face. The faces that are on it right now, obviously very much temporary, because they look real bad. I just sketched them up in Photoshop real quick and slapped them onto the model. But after every single time it goes down, it goes back up obviously, and then it turns 180 degrees, and then it goes back down, it goes back up, turns 180 degrees, and it just keeps on looping like that. Just to give it a little bit more liveliness and a little bit more character to it than something that just goes It's, I don't know if that was on screen, but you can probably see what I mean. That just felt a little too static, so I gave it a little bit more life to it by having a turn. And also, I'm getting slowly better at animating things, because this one I actually thought, okay, if I just turn it 180 degrees, it's very mechanical. So it has a bit of anticipation and a little bit of overshoot in the way it moves. And I'm getting more used to working with like these keyframe curves, right? Because it's still just two keyframes. It's still just saying, at this point you're at 0 degrees rotation, at this point you're at 180 degrees rotation. But being able to like make a curve that goes a little under and then a little over that, it makes it so that it does a little anticipation move and then it overshoots a little at the end. And that makes the animation and the feeling of the entire thing so much more organic and so much more believable, and less like it's a programmer that told it to move 180 degrees, which at the end of the day is of course still the case. So I'm feeling an increase in animation skill as well, which is very much a good thing, because that's been a thing that I've for years struggled with to do somewhat decently, and I'm getting better at it. So I added the sound effects for walking, I added sound effects for jumping, I added sound effects for landing after a jump, I added sound effects for hurt sounds. The walking and landing sounds I just got off Storyblocks, which I have a subscription to for unlimited downloads for video, sound effects, motion templates, all that kind of stuff. So I just used that. I am probably going to go and record custom sounds for that at some point. The hurt sound and the jump sounds are my own voice. I just spent like 20 minutes shouting into a microphone like, hey, ha, hoo, ha, that kind of stuff, and pitch it up a little bit just to make it fit a little bit better with the character, because it's a little bit of a cutie character, right? So it needed a little bit of a higher pitched voice, and I think actually it works relatively well. I might not even replace them. I might just keep these sound effects because they work relatively well. I added a temporary music track to the level. It's definitely not the kind of music track that I'm going to stick with long term here, because it's a difficult level to have an ID for. I'm not a very musically inclined person to begin with, but this level in particular, I don't really know what kind of atmosphere I want to have in the music. I've put on a couple of different kinds of music, either just royalty free again from Storyblocks or from other games that I liked, from Crash Bandicoot, from Spyro. Nothing really seems to fit, so I'm going to have to find the right style, the right atmosphere for this level, and I'm having trouble with that. On a more technical level, I did learn something this week. I learned a lot of things, but one very important thing is the audio cue system in Unreal, where I can just throw in a bunch of sound effects, and then you can either have them play one after another, or you can have them play just a random one out of the selection, which is what I use it for at the moment. Then it goes through something that's called a modulator, which allows you to, say, play it in a pitch between like X percentage of the original file under and above, and the same with volume. So most of the sound effects go through a volume that's between 95 and 105% of the original clip. And then for pitch, it's usually, I think I'm using between 80% and 120%. Meaning that I have about, for the jumping sound, for instance, I think I have about 13 different jumping sounds that I ended up using in the game. Those 13 different sounds then can also almost infinitely be different through voice or pitch shifting and volume differences. So there's not going to be a feeling of repeating sounds, relatively speaking. I also learned, and this is very, very useful information to have going forward, that inside of an animation in Unreal, you can put in like I don't know what they call it anymore, but it's like a little flag that you can call upon in your animation blueprint, saying, okay, when this happens in the animation, do this, like either change a variable, or in this case, where I used it for is play a sound. So it literally plays the sound the moment the character's foot touches the ground. It's not a loop that just happens to maybe sometimes line up with the actual animation. It plays the sounds based on what animation and when in the animation it happens. And that's, honestly, the fact that that's possible made my head explode, because that makes so many things so much fucking easier than I thought it was going to be going forward. So that's a very good thing that I have picked up. Now, the main thing that I want to talk about this week, that's all been fun and that's all good. The main thing that I want to talk about is I started making the hub world. I wanted to make the hub world look a little bit like a swamp, because I figured, you know, a bit of a dark atmosphere for this darker character, which also has a bit of cutesy in it, would be very nice. But as I started working on it, I found myself making a forest more so than a swamp. And walking around in that forest, I figured, you know what, it actually works a lot better. So I'm gonna stick with the forest idea. I made a quick test map just to get used to the landscaping and foliage tools in Unreal, which, by the way, I just want to point out, apparently Unreal does not support pen pressure, which makes the sculpting of the landscaping stupidly annoying. Like, really, honestly, the fucking worst. To the point where, if I do this again, I might actually just make the landscape in Blender and import it. Downside being is that you can't easily then edit it in Unreal afterwards. The sculpting tools in Unreal, dude, they need a massive upgrade. Or I need to figure out how to enable pen pressure, but I googled it and more people are running into this issue. Pen pressure in Unreal for sculpting just does not seem to exist, and it's fucking stupid. That I just needed to get off my chest real quick. Anyway, so I made a little forest area where I could just walk around. I played around a little bit with lighting and with fog, because, and this is, there is no, every time you hear a creative person talk about anything, they say there's not a single make this look good button. And while for the most part that is true, I've done two things this week which will pretty much make this look good buttons. Number one is the smoothing brush in sculpting for the landscaping, because it does help things just look a lot better. Still, the sculpting tools themselves are horrible, but smoothing things out, it makes things look pretty good fairly easily. But more importantly, adding light rays to your scene, specifically like if you can get away with it from a computational standpoint, volumetric fog-based light rays, that just makes a scene look 10 times better, at least if it actually fits within the scene, right? So I did that. Because specifically, this has to be a magical type forest, and it has to feel magical and mystical and mysterious and stuff like that. So having these light rays shine through of moonlight through the trees and through the forest and that kind of stuff really makes it look so much more alive and so much more like you're walking through a forest rather than just like trees. It's actually unreal how big the difference there is. And it's an interesting thing because last night before recording this, I made the actual hub world that I'm going to be using, at least for this first test build, but it should be relatively easy for me to make separate paths within this hub world when I start adding other levels into the game. So this is probably just going to be the hub world for the game altogether. And unlike the level that I made before, the video editing level, which is going to change massively going forward, I actually started by blocking this one out, just putting in some rough geometry, just saying, okay, we walk up here, then we have a platforming challenge, then we walk a little bit downwards, then we have a little bit of a lift thing going on, and then we have a wall jumping section, all that good stuff, right? So I actually blocked it out before I started doing the landscaping around it, and that made because if I had just done the landscaping, I wouldn't have had any idea what to make. So making the actual platforming sections of the level first and then just throwing those platforms away and just replacing that by doing some landscaping made for what I think is actually a pretty decent hub world starting point. And you guys will see some footage for it, and again, hopefully next week you'll be able to play through it, which is both exciting and terrifying for people to, after like 3 months of work, for people to get their hands on this. That's going to be an entire thing, and I'll talk about more about that next week, I'm guessing. So that leaves us with quite a bit of time left, actually. That leaves us with what I still need to do before I want this in other people's hands. Number one is there's still a couple more models that I forgot that I do need to make, because I need a model for the end level trigger. Right now I just have that cone with the other cones turning around it. That's very much a placeholder. That's not I don't want that in the game. I don't even want that in the test build of the game, right? So I need to make some kind of like crystal or something. It's probably going to be relatively easy to make. I just like need to make it. Number two, the checkpoint. The checkpoint at this point is also just a temporary weird-ass thing that doesn't really have a model to it. It's just a floating sphere that needs a model. Again, it's probably just going to be some type of crystal, which I do want to give it an animation at some point, right? When you actually activate the checkpoint, having it like turn around and like do a little bit zap, zap, zap with electricity or whatever. I have some ideas for that. I'm going to refrain from doing that for now. I just wanted to look not like it's literally a placeholder element, which right now they're literally placeholder elements. Then I also need to figure out the menus, because for the most part the menus might not be necessary, but I want to maybe include, I want to do a main menu, maybe not for this build, but I want to be able to do that eventually. And I want to be able to, at the end of a level, have a replay level or return to hub world option. So those are menus that I need to make, and I need to just kind of figure out how to efficiently make a good working menu in Unreal, because I fucked around with it a little bit, but it didn't really work the way I wanted it, and it could only work with the mouse clicks and not with inputs from a controller or stuff like that, and it was just a whole mess. I need to figure out menus. And then there's the fact that I also need to design like at least somewhat decent menus, right? So that's an entire thing that's probably going to take a bit of time next week. And the most important thing is in the hub worlds, I have these little portals, which I don't have portals for them yet. I need to make a particle system that looks somewhat decent, that looks like an interesting portal. I have a very good idea in my mind as to what they should look like. Now I just need to make that, and that's gonna be quite a thing to do. So I'm very curious as to how that's gonna go. And ideally, right now, the places where I'm going to put the portals also have temporary elements. They're just like a couple of cubes stacked together. I would very much like to also make some model for that, even if it's just very simple. I think I do want a model for that as well. So there's a couple of things that I still need to do, and then we finally get to the point where I can say, guys, here's a download link to a Google Drive document. Go download it, play it, and let me know what you think. Hopefully that point will be next week. It'll be the first week of December, which means that we'll, at the very latest, like I want to be able to bring you guys this build before the end of 2021. I was going to say 2022. I fucking hope that I would. But before the end of 2021, right? I want to be able to get you guys this build. I would have very much liked to have it before November is over. That's not really going to work because as I'm recording this, it's the 27th and this is just not going to happen. Realistically speaking, I'm not going to go through this entire project in one sitting because it's a pretty goddamn big project, and it, on one hand, it keeps getting bigger, and I am very much aware that I'm slowly falling into the issue of scope creep, because it started as, oh, let's make a 3D platformer, but then you have to define where does the 3D platformer, like how big is it gonna be? And at this moment I have ideas for 3 worlds in total. That's a total of, like, one of those worlds is relatively short, and that's probably going to be the next I make because it's a relatively easy world to make. It's only 3 levels. Then we have this movie making world where I'm working on a level for that now, and that is altogether going to be probably 5 levels, I want to say. And then I've got another idea for another world that's based on like painting and stuff like that, which is going to be either 4 or 5 levels as well. And that's a very complicated world idea as well, which we'll get more into that when I actually get to making that, which will probably be the very last thing I want to make. Not because it's technically difficult, I have some ideas that might be technically difficult to do, but mostly because from a level design perspective, that's going to be a hell, and I just want to get in a little bit more practice with that before I take that on. So that's 3 worlds in total right now, but now I'm thinking, is 3 worlds enough? Because that's going to be like, I don't know, 14, 15 levels for the entire game. That seems like it wouldn't be unreasonable. That seems like it's a decently lengthy indie 3D platformer, right? But I'm thinking maybe 4 or 5 worlds would like fill it out a little bit better, especially also for the overworld, for the hub world. It would make it feel more like a bigger forest rather than just some paths that you walk through, which that's also fine, I guess. So I'm trying to keep myself back from pushing myself too much in a scope creep problem. But that all being said, it's such a big project, right? Because just making those 15 levels with all like interesting, fun mechanics and keeping it fun and interesting and good and stuff like that it's gonna take a long time to make that entire thing. And I'll probably want to just go off in little separate adventures like I did with my with the game jam the last couple of weeks. Maybe it's not a bad idea to just make something else in between, but then the question becomes, when do I put this project on hold for a little while, and how long do I give myself to work on that other project? These kind of questions are also relevant. They're not very relevant necessarily to the actual process of making this specific game, but just me as a creative in general. How do I deal with these kind of things, right? And I don't have an answer for you right now. So if you want to get an answer, do subscribe. This is a very, very arbitrary subscribe plug, isn't it? Yes, it is. As it stands though, I've been talking through the entirety of building the lighting for this level. We're at 97% right now, so I'm going to end this devlog. It's a little bit of a shorter one, because honestly, I'm in a hurry. It's 5 o'clock, the day this is supposed to be uploaded. I've got like 4 hours to edit this. 3 hours to edit this, I mean. So I better hurry the fuck up. See you next week. Link down below to the Game Jam game. It's the Spy Loop. It's real good. I really like it.